Welcome to the special Snowmageddon version of Verdict with Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you, and there's a lot of you that are listening that I know are dealing with the insanity of the freezing rain and the snow. I hope you're enjoying it with your kids, making some memories, but it's a lot going on, Senator. So for everybody out there that is listening, God bless you. Stay warm.
Well, stay warm and stay safe. There are power outages across the country. There is snow and ice across about half of the country. The state of Texas is largely engulfed in the winter storm. There's snow and ice up north. You and I, Ben, are both in Houston right now. Houston's still in the 30s, so we haven't had snow or ice. It's supposed to drop to the 20s tonight. Yeah. And look, my counsel to everyone is stay safe. If you don't need to be on icy roads, don't go out on icy roads. Take some time and be home with the kids. Keep your family safe. It's a good excuse to do something with your kids, do something with your wife. Or your husband, and just don't take any unnecessary travel right now. Stay safe, and make sure you keep your family safe.
By the way, Senator, have you played this game called Mahjong yet?
Do I look like a 90-year-old woman?
Okay, I this is what happens. See, you come up with this idea: spend time with your family, play games. And I got suckered into my first ever game of Mahjong. I literally wanted to beat my head against. So if it's offered to you, run is what I'm trying to tell you. I barely made it through a game. It was like watching paint dry, but more painful.
So Ben, I'm actually male. So no, I have not played that game.
I told you, I got suckered into it. This is what happens. It's like, let's play games.
I did this week play a game called poker. You may have heard of it. It's something that men do when they gather.
I also got in trouble. This is what happens, okay? I'm glad you brought that up. I got in trouble for teaching my twins who are 6 and my 9-year-old how to play Texas Hold'em with chips. I was like, we're not playing for money. We're just playing for chips. I got in trouble, therefore I got punished with Mahjong. So it's full circle. I'm glad that you figured that out there.
Yeah, that's you're failing as a father.
As I literally have a poker chip right here. Do you see this? There it is. Yeah.
If you don't teach your boys to play poker, you are failing as a father.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to quote you on that as my rebuttal later on.
I'm not sure that will get you out of any trouble at all.
All I know is whoever made Mahjong, I want to get in a bar fight with him. I just want to be on the record for that. It may be the dumbest game I've ever played. Come at me on the comments.
I think it's like a 2,000-year-old Chinese woman.
Yeah, I believe, and if I found her, it may be the first I'd ever even think about hitting a woman. I just want to. That's how much I hate this game. I'll be on the record. I'm fine with that. You can come at me in the comments section.
I'm just saying, if the 2,000-year-old Chinese woman happens to be alive, I'm not sure you want to fight her because there's some weird zombie action going on.
That's true. I'll be throwing poker chips at her. I like it. All right, we got a lot to talk about on today's show, and you've been warned, men out there, about Mahjong. Don't take the bait. I don't care how cold it is or how long the power's off or how close the Mahjong table is to the fireplace. Don't take the bait. We've got a lot. Minneapolis, we got to talk about, Senator, and the chaos there. We also have a government shutdown that's looming apparently over this issue with ICE. Let's go through that real quick.
Yeah, let's start with Minneapolis. And listen, everyone who has anything resembling a conscience is horrified by what's happening in Minneapolis. And what I want to call on everyone to do is just ratchet things down. Ratchet the rhetoric down, ratchet the anger down. You know, we are a nation, and we're supposed to be one nation. And right now we're seeing a confrontation. Now look, this is an organized confrontation. This is a deliberate confrontation. We're going to talk about that. But I want to start with the rhetoric that politicians are using on both sides, and the rhetoric, frankly, that people are using, just people on both sides on X are using, where on one side they view every shooting as an absolute tragedy, as evidence that America has become Nazi Germany. On the other side, you see some people that seem pretty eager to celebrate a violent and lethal confrontation with law enforcement. And listen, there are lethal confrontations with law enforcement. They happen, but anytime you have an American who is killed in a confrontation with law enforcement, it is tragic that a life is lost, particularly in this instance. We now have two people, two Americans who've been killed in confrontations with law enforcement who from all appearances are not violent criminals. They don't have long criminal records, or at least if they do, we don't know them right now. There's no indication that they do. And anytime you have an encounter gone wrong that results in a fatality, there is cause for mourning. There is cause for grief.
Yeah.
That was somebody's mother, that was somebody's brother or sister or father, and that's a tragedy. At the same time, we can ask what has caused these shootings, what has caused these violent encounters. I'll give you an amazing stat, which is in Texas, where you and I both live, there have been anywhere from 6 times to 10 times as many ICE arrests in Texas as there have been in Minnesota. The numbers vary, but according to 2026 reports, Texas has seen approximately 60,000 arrests, ICE arrests, compared to approximately 10,000 in Minnesota. That's one estimate. That there are numbers that vary. But we're not seeing violent confrontations with ICE in Texas. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One, the state and local officials are cooperating.
Yep.
Local police are working with the federal immigration enforcement agents. In Minnesota, the governor, the mayor, the local officials have decided to use Tim Walz's word, go to war with the federal government.
Civil war is what they're describing. And you have that governor there over his fence, like yelling and encouraging people to go after ICE.
You have Democrat politicians who are behaving with reckless irresponsibility, urging citizens, go out, find ICE, confront ICE, get in their way, frustrate them, block them from arresting violent criminals, from arresting murderers, from arresting gangbangers, from arresting child molesters. And you see those efforts that really the flames being fanned as you use rhetoric calling federal law enforcement officers Nazis or Klansmen or Gestapo. Well, that leads to the temperature going up and up and up. I'll say secondly, just a word of advice to anyone who is in an interaction with law enforcement. Which is don't do anything on your own side to escalate. If you are driving a vehicle, an SUV, and you drive that vehicle directly into a law enforcement agent, the odds are quite significant you will be met with lethal force. That's true in Minnesota. It's true most places across the country that if you respond to law enforcement with violence, you are risking your own safety and your own life. Likewise, this latest shooting, look, as we sit here today, we don't know all the facts. And one of the things I would urge people to do is not to just leap to conclusions. Anytime you have an officer-involved shooting, there's always an investigation. That is standard practice in just about any context. And so there'll be an investigation here. You and I have both seen a number of the videos. It is hard to tell from the videos exactly what happened. There's a lot of day after quarterbacking going frame by frame. What I can tell you is this. We know that the individual who lost his life came to the protest. He came to the protest, as has been reported multiple times, with a firearm, with multiple magazines of ammunition. And there was a violent confrontation that ultimately resulted in his being shot and killed. What exactly transpired? I'm going to wait for the investigation to figure that out. There are basic rules that govern when officers, either police or federal law enforcement officers, when they can permissibly use lethal force. They can use lethal force if they reasonably believe that their safety is in danger or the safety of others are in danger. And so they can use lethal force if, in the instance of the first woman who was killed, we saw, and it took a couple of days for it to come out, the video of the ICE agent from his camera, and she clearly drives the vehicle straight into him and hits him. Mm-hmm. And the ICE agent ended up going to the hospital with internal injuries. If you actually run over a law enforcement officer, that is a justifiable use of lethal force. With respect to the most recent incident, it will depend upon the extent to which the agents reasonably believed that the individual posed a threat to them, and he had a gun. There was confusion at the time, and so there needs to be an investigation. Here's what they can't do. What they can't do is if a suspect is fleeing. And by the way, fleeing even if they've committed a crime. There's a classic example of someone steals a television and they're running away with the television. An officer is not allowed to shoot someone in the back, even as if they're committing a crime.
Exactly.
The Supreme Court has ruled that you cannot use that lethal force to shoot someone in the back when they're fleeing a crime. So whether it is a good shoot or a bad shoot turns on the question of did the officers reasonably believe that the individual posed a serious threat to themselves or to others. They can intervene if someone is getting ready to hurt somebody else. They can also use lethal force to prevent that. I'll say this also, though. That question will take some time and an investigation to resolve. But the individual who was shot, he could have avoided that risk altogether.
All of this.
He could have avoided. Number one, he could have chosen not to go to the protest. That's one choice.
Yep.
Now, you might say, well, he feels passionately that he disagrees with what ICE is doing and he wants to exercise his First Amendment rights. Okay, those are protected. He has that right. Secondly, he could have chosen to go there and not bring a firearm. Now, lots of folks on X are going back and forth saying the Second Amendment, you got a right to bring your gun. And you're right, you do. You do have a right to bring your gun. That being said, if you are going into an environment where there is a reasonable possibility that you will get in a violent confrontation with law enforcement, my advice to everyone, leave your damn gun home. Yeah. If you are anticipating violent confrontation with law enforcement, you're having a gun.
If you're wanting to get arrested, if you're wanting to get a mugshot that day, and there's some protesters that go out there and they want to get arrested, and if you're going to fight the police, there's two different types of being arrested. You go back to civil rights, and Martin Luther King was a perfect example of this. Many times they knew they were going to be arrested, but they did it in a very peaceful manner. Fighting police officers while having a firearm on you is always stupid. You're putting your life at risk. As my dad said, we were talking about this, and he's obviously life in law enforcement. I carry a gun. When I'm pulled over, the first thing I do is I tell that police officer I have a gun.
Absolutely.
I want you to know it. What do you want me to do? I can either take it off, I can put it on the floorboard, it's on my holster, on my waist, whatever. But you have a right to carry a gun. And I think this is one of those things I think it's important we make it clear. I'm in favor of people carrying a gun. You are as well. What I'm not in favor of is saying that carrying a gun while fighting a cop is somehow protected as part of your Second Amendment. That is not how it works. And there's too many people out there that are like, well, so now you guys are saying you're not in favor of the Second Amendment. No, I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. I'm also in favor of you not fighting law enforcement while having a gun on your person and putting their lives at risk, because you're putting their lives at risk and your own life at risk. I just want to get that off my chest because I've been seeing these internet warriors and they drive me insane. Yeah,
and look, just because you have a right to do something doesn't mean that doing it in those circumstances isn't stupid.
Yes.
If you are anticipating getting in a violent confrontation with police officers, by the way, that's stupid in and of itself. You should not get in a violent confrontation with police officers. But if you are entering an environment where you see that as a reasonable possibility, if you have an IQ that breaks room temperature, any firearm you have, leave it at home. Why? Because in a violent confrontation with law enforcement, if you have a firearm, the odds of that confrontation escalating rise dramatically. Look, police officers don't know if you intend to use that firearm to commit harm, to harm others or to harm them. We are seeing, sadly, leftists targeting ICE agents for murder. And if you have that firearm and you're engaged in violence, the agent's perception of the physical threat to them is understandably much, much higher.
Yep.
Had that individual left his gun at home, he almost certainly would be alive today. And third, I'd say, don't engage in a violent confrontation with law enforcement. Don't, and listen, many of these...
And by the way, I wish the Governor Walz would also say the same thing you're saying right now. I wish the mayor would say the same thing as well, because they're out there basically saying they're not going to risk their lives. They're wanting people to hire people and encourage others to show up and basically go out there and risk their lives. They're going to stay in their mansions. They're going to stay back in their billion-dollar yachts writing these checks to these protesters and follow the money. But you've got a governor and a mayor there that are deliberately, I would say, putting their citizens' lives at risk and encouraging it. They're not pulling back. After we saw the last lady that was shot when she was running over an ICE agent with a 2-ton car, they've encouraged more of that, which I also think is very sick from them as an elected official.
It is reckless and it is irresponsible. And they're doing it, I will say, from the political agenda of a leftist. Seeing more civilians killed in confrontations with ICE agents furthers their political agenda. They want ICE delegitimized. They want enforcing our federal immigration laws delegitimized. Why? Because they supported for 4 years open borders. They've decided they are a radical open borders party. And every single shooting you have, particularly with someone who is not a Trender or Agua gang member, an MS-13 gang member, someone who appears to be a mother of 3 or an ICU nurse, every shooting that happens, unfortunately, we're seeing Democrats in the media use to inflame the tensions, to divide us more, and to distract from the absolute scandal of $9 billion stolen by Somali fraudsters in Minnesota.
This is the get out of jail free card, and we need to connect that dot for people so they understand. I truly believe that the Democratic Party as a whole, certainly the governor and the mayor, they need a distraction from the billions that were stolen and their connection and their donations that came to them from some of these people that are even in jail now. They need this to go away. I think every time there's a shooting there, they think, great, we're getting away from that scandal, and this is the new thing, so this is working out perfectly for us. That also is a part of this, the politics that people have to understand.
I think that is absolutely right, particularly because I think many of those Democrat politicians are complicit and face their own liability for what is to date the most massive taxpayer fraud that has ever been discovered. There may be larger ones in states like California and New York, but Minnesota is right now the single largest in the history of America, and the Democrats really, really, really want everyone to forget that. Let me say something else. I don't think it's an accident that this is happening in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is where the George Floyd riots began. Yeah. It's where the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots began, where the looting began, where the firebombing of police cars began, where the violence began. And there has grown up an organized, funded resistance in Minneapolis that operates in many ways like a military force, operates with intelligence, operates with millions of dollars behind it, operates with surveillance, operates by targeting law enforcement agents, operates by sending people in to deliberately obstruct law enforcement, including you had at one of these instances, one detainee bit the finger off of a law enforcement agent. You had another person who was arrested who had spikes that she was putting to blow the tires out on law enforcement vehicles, and she was arrested with a whole bag full of those. They are engaged in not just peaceful protests, standing there holding a sign, but deliberately active, violent protests designed to stop law enforcement from arresting the criminals. And there's real money behind it. And listen, I would call upon DOJ and the FBI, follow the money in Minnesota. Amen. You see report after report after report of people being surveilled, of people being stopped on the street and asked for their identification, not by law enforcement, but by these rogue militias. And you know, the Democrats and the media were really fond for a long time of using the word insurrection.
Yes, they love that word.
A violent effort to take over a city is, in fact, an insurrection, sustained, engaged in violence, funded, and we are seeing that. And indeed, I've seen pictures on X of parts of Minnesota where they're building walls and trying to create an autonomous zone. And it is exacerbated by the fact that the Democrat politicians are handcuffing the police so that the local police are not able to do their job. And I'm certain those police are deeply frustrated by the politician bosses that prevent them from doing their job.
By the way, what you just said is the perfect segue into the second subject that I want to cover, and that is Democrats right now are trying to find any way they can to fight back and to hurt Donald Trump because approval ratings give you your power in Washington, D.C., especially if you're dealing with rhinos on the House side or even on the Senate side, right? If they look at the poll numbers more than anybody, they want a reason not to stand with President Trump on certain issues. That's how Washington works. And what we're now witnessing is Democrats, I think, feel like this issue plays to their base. It engages their base. And they're now going to use it to justify another government shutdown. This is my opinion. I want to get your thoughts on it because I think that we're headed there for this reason where they're like, hey, we have a justification now for what we want to get rid of ICE. We want to get rid of ICE funding for them. Is that worth shutting the government down over? Are you seeing the way I'm seeing it now that this is where we're headed?
Yes, but before we get to shutdown, I want to point out because politically it's more than just their base. Yes, it is true that these violent protests energize their base, drives turnout, drives fundraising. The crazies get all the more excited, the more violence the left foments. But it's about more than that. It's also about totally capturing the news cycle, taking the fraud and corruption out of the news cycle. That's a totally separate objective that is critically important to them. But there is a third one, Ben, which is not the base of the Democrat Party, but rather moderate women, soccer moms, who may not be deeply politically engaged. And historically, moderate suburban women have been a swing vote. If you look in the last decade, the two most predominant political movements we've seen is that we've seen, number one, blue-collar voters moving right. That's moved Midwestern states. States like Ohio have gotten a lot red. They used to be purple. Ohio's now red. But we've also seen suburban voters, particularly suburban women, moving left. And that's moved what used to be red states to purple. States like Georgia and Arizona, both of them just a few years ago, they had 4 Republican senators from Georgia and Arizona. We now have 4 Democrat senators from Georgia and Arizona. The reason is suburban women in Atlanta and Phoenix move left. The Democrats and the media are seizing on this to tell stories and understand they're looking for not the person that is following every development, but just the person who's living their life and taking in what's happening and seeing a headline, ICE shoots mother of 3. ICE shoots ICU nurse. ICE apprehends 5-year-old child. That story was everywhere. By the way, it's a total lie. It's absolutely false. In fact, what happened is ICE came to apprehend the father. The father ran off and abandoned the 5-year-old child. And understandably, ICE was not going to leave a 5-year-old child alone on the street in the middle of winter.
Freezing to death outside. Yeah. I mean, they wouldn't leave him alone, period. But the argument that the left has made, I'm like, let me get this straight. You guys want the kid to be left alone just to wander the streets of a city and be alone? That's insane. And then in the winter when they could freeze to death, that's also insane. They actually found the woman, the mother of the child.
Yes. It is reported they found the mother of the child. They knocked on the door, tried to give the child back to her. She wouldn't take him. She closed the door and said, no, I won't take him. And so, look, the purpose of that story is not actually factual journalism. It is entirely about telling a story to pull on people's heartstrings and to cause suburban voters who are not paying close attention to say, oh, this has gone too far. If they're shooting moms and nurses and arresting little kids, clearly it's gone too far. This is a political campaign. And tragically, it's a political campaign that is costing people's lives. But because, look, the political campaign is having some real effect. It is having effect. We saw, John Kasich, speaking of suburban women, we saw John Kasich put out a whole video saying, I'm hurting so much. We must stop arresting illegals. Unfortunately, that's the target audience. And in the world of politics, we've got to realize that we've got to confront the bad stories with stories that are compelling. And it's where tone matters. And I would encourage, look, the administration is doing a fantastic job securing the border. Illegal crossings have dropped 99%. It's phenomenal. They're doing a terrific job going and arresting violent criminals, murderers and rapists and gangbangers, which is why we've seen the murder rate drop 20%. We covered that in the last podcast, that the murder rate has dropped 20% across the country. That's a massive success. What I think the administration could do better is the tone with which they're describing this. That immediately when an incident like this happens, they come out guns blazing, that we took out a violent terrorist, hooray. And the problem is, particularly for someone not paying attention, if you're being told this is a mom of three and there's no indication, she's not waving an ISIS flag or doesn't have a suicide vest around her.
Yeah.
Escalating the rhetoric doesn't help, and it actually loses credibility. And so I would encourage the administration to be more measured, to recognize the tragedy and to say we don't want anyone's lives to be lost. And the politicians who are pouring gasoline onto this fire, they need to stop.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I also think, look, facts matter. Explaining what happened is very important. The 5-year-old story is a perfect example. All the morning news shows, ABC, NBC, CBS, they led with that story and ran it into the ground that morning, that a 5-year-old was detained by ICE, and they didn't correct that story. That is incredibly frustrating, because that's also what we're up against here, is that. And that goes back to, again, the political opportunity here. Not only is the Democratic Party looking for an opportunity, so is the media. And they now believe that, like, this civil war and hold this flag up is, and plan it is, we as Democrats, we're willing to shut down the government to defund ICE. That's going to be the premise, is what I've been told from many in the media that I've talked to, and some of my friends on the left. They're like, yeah, we're going to shut down. We're justified this time way more than we were last time. Yep. Last time we really weren't justified very much in shutting down the government, but we tried it anyway. Now they actually feel emboldened. Do you think a government shutdown is going to come, yes or no?
Yes, 100% yes.
Okay,
Look,
and it's going to be tied to this issue, right?
Yes,
okay.
100%. The last government shutdown, which was the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats forced through, really to show his radical base that he was fighting because he's scared of being primaried by AOC. But they also did it to tee up the issue of health care and the cost of health insurance premiums. Mind you, the premiums have skyrocketed because of Obamacare, because of their policy. But they did the shutdown. It was entirely with an eye towards November, that they say, look, we fought like crazy on health insurance, and the mean Republicans didn't give us what we wanted, which was $50 billion in corporate welfare subsidies to giant health insurance companies. And that's why your health insurance has gone up. Now, that's factually wrong. But it is a political narrative they're telling here. They are going to tell the narrative, we will not fund ICE under any circumstances, and we will shut the government down. And by the way, the media covered for them so much, their base was so happy with the shutdown, I think they perceive very few downsides to shutting the government down. Now, this shutdown that will happen on January 30th will likely be smaller than the previous one. And the reason is we funded some
Explain why, because does that mean they're being more strategic in how they're doing it? Or explain that. Okay.
No, between the two, we have passed some appropriations bills. So once appropriations bills are passed, those departments are funding. So Ag, the Department of Agriculture, is funded. And so everything that goes through Ag is funded. CJS, Commerce, Justice, and Science, that is funded. Energy is funded. Water is funded. Interior, Environment, Ledge Branch, Military Construction, and the VA. All of those are funded. So the shutdown will not impact any of those. So what would a shutdown impact? It would impact Defense, the Department of War. It would impact the Department of Labor. It would impact HHS. It would impact the Department of Education. It would impact the Department of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. It would impact the SEC, the FCC, the independent agencies, and it would impact DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and ICE directly under that. And I think you're going to see the Democrats force a shutdown. And actually, you don't have to take my words for it. Here, let me read for you what Schumer tweeted out to the world. He said, quote, "What's happening in Minnesota is appalling and unacceptable in any American city. Democrats sought common sense reforms in the Department of Homeland Security spending bill. But because of Republicans' refusal to stand up to President Trump, the DHS bill is woefully inadequate to rein in the abuses of ICE. I will vote no. Senate Democrats will not provide the votes to proceed to the appropriations bill if the DHS funding bill is included." There he is, explicitly, unequivocally threatening a shutdown. I think that's what we're going to see come January 30th.
Well, and by the way, he's not the only one. So Elizabeth Warren was responding to another tweet. I want to read it. It was just the tweet she was responding to give it context. Says, reminder, DHS legislation that funds ICE at current levels without policy restrictions is in the Senate and needs 60 votes to pass. Deadline is next Friday. Elizabeth Warren puts that out there with this, and she says, quote, "I'm a hell no, not a penny more for ICE. We should not fund this terror." So she's also jumping on board with this as well. And then there's other senators have come out. And so this is why I say this isn't a one-off. This is clearly a coordinated attack is the best way I can describe it.
Well, here's Chris Murphy on CNN. Give a listen.
I want to ask about what your leader, Chuck Schumer, says, that Democrats are going to vote against a government funding package that is before the Senate soon, and it includes money for the Department of Homeland Security. How is that going to play out?
Well, we can't vote to fund this lawless Department of Homeland Security.
We can't fund this lawless Department of Homeland Security. Senator, that's pretty bold words, if you ask me, by a senator that clearly is like, hey, we're all on the same page. This is what we're doing now.
Yeah, look, that's the position of every Democrat. And understand, this is the same position that is abolish ICE and abolish the police. They're saying they're going to refuse to fund the Department of Homeland Security, the department that is charged with keeping us safe, with securing our border, with protecting our families. And the Democrats are saying, we won't fund it. So what will happen? I think there's a chance we see Congress put together an appropriations package that funds everything but DHS. That might pass. Okay. In terms of DHS, I think the Democrats are going to force a shutdown, and I think they want it to be extended. And in order,
so this is not a short one. To be clear, you think they want this to be painful, almost like they're running in the midterms on this issue of ICE?
I think they want to be able to tell their base, we are defunding ICE. We are abolishing ICE. We are against law enforcement. We're with the criminals. That's their messaging.
It is incredible. We're going to keep covering it. I can promise you that. We're going to keep exposing it. I go back to the issue of follow the money here. That's something I'm certainly interested in, and many other Americans as well. So don't forget, we do this show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Hit that subscribe or auto-download button and make sure you do not miss an episode. Plus, the majority of the episodes now are on Facebook and on YouTube, so you can watch them there. If you're a YouTube watcher, just put in Verdict with Ted Cruz as well, and you can watch this episode there as well. And the Senator and I will see you. Oh, one other thing. Let me just say this. Make sure you share this podcast. When you guys put it on social media, it reaches people that don't normally listen to it. So I mean this sincerely. Thank you. But people I see all the time in the airport, they're like, hey, what can I do to help? Share the show. Share the show so other people hear the info we're putting out there. It helps tremendously. It's a great way to get involved. So again, we'll see you back here in a couple of days.